Today I'll show you setting up my garden beds. I'll also give you a bit of a look around as to what I've actually got growing and some of the ideas that I'm playing with at the moment. You'll get some interesting little tips along the way, some good ideas on how garden beds work. Also a little bit more of an insight into what I'm interested in, what I'm doing, and the current experiments I've got going. So it'll give you an idea of what videos that I have made and will be making that may actually interest you. Come along, take a look, enjoy. Hopefully you love it. So I made a little video a little while back where I was actually building up my garden beds. Now, of course, step one, of course, is making the dang thing, filling it up. But step two, then you've actually got to plant things. So that's the long, time-consuming part. Give you an idea, just here, plant it straight into the ground, a few sorts of beans and some spaghetti squash. And over here, I've put in some radish because those grow very quickly. Now here's a little trick. This one's going to be quite useful for you. Now the toilet roll method, where you start your seedlings off, I figured is actually a pretty good way to go with most of your radishes. Spacing for radishes is supposed to be roughly 5 centimeters apart. Now if you're planting them inside toilet rolls as your seeding starters, that's roughly 5 centimeters apart. And given that I am absolutely terrible with spacing, it is probably one of my greatest weaknesses, figured that's a pretty good way to go. So far so good, and hopefully that will be a beneficial little tip for you. And I think carrots will also work this way, is my idea, which I will also experiment with. Another trick when you're planting a garden, a lot of seeds and plants will prefer to actually be planted straight into the ground, which is great. And then there's a lot of them that will actually prefer to be grown in like a seed growing mix in little punnets and so forth to sort of protect them a little bit more. Now, the ones that you're supposed to plant straight in the ground also don't necessarily have any disadvantage to doing in the punnets with the others. So other than the ones that I've just shown you, I've done most of mine at the moment in that way then I can sort of organize my garden a little bit better rather than planting here and there and trying to remember where I've put everything. So here's an example here where I've basically separated them out. Now, not all seeds are actually going to germinate, so there's always a failure rate. So what I've done is, once again, the toilet roll method, which I think is utterly brilliant. I've separated out a line of each and basically labelled what they are so I don't completely forget, which I will guarantee have forgotten. And then this is all spring onions. Spring onions don't need to be done in a punnet like this. They can go straight into the ground, but yeah, I figured I'd give it a go that way. So here I've got a parsley parsnip, which I've only just started getting some coming through. Then I've got my mini capsicums, which are finally sprouting. Then I've got a form of cucumber, which very fast grower, some eggplants, a pumpkin, which doesn't seem to have bothered sprouting, and of course all of those. So I'll start planting these out now. And then the other one that I've got here, so spinach, kale, of which it looks like only one's coming through, which I was actually quite shocked by that. I've got 2 different forms of broccoli, wombok, which has finally started to come through, fennel, which I actually really like fennel myself. I find some people apparently don't, but I also discovered it seems to keep away cabbage moth. So broccoli, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, all of those things in that cabbage family are prone to cabbage moth, but fennel will help keep that away. So I'm going to give that a go and see if that actually works for me. And then I also have 2 different forms of Brussels sprouts. I've got mixed feelings about Brussels sprouts overall, but they're supposed to be a good producer. I know if you cook them the right way, they can taste really nice. And one of them's purple, and I just really want to see what that looks like. So the 2 trickiest parts when it comes to planting, as far as I've been able to establish personally, is 1, spacing, which I admittedly am very poor at. Ultimately, in the grand scheme, you can thin it out. Just keep an eye on it, make sure they don't choke each other. The other is a little bit trickier, and that's actually planting the right things near each other. So there's a few factors involved with that. So of these factors, the two primary ones that you're going to be looking at, and both are relatively easy to find information about online, but it can still be a bit tricky. First and foremost is the nutrients. Primarily you're going to be looking at nitrogen. So some plants like a lot of nitrogen, some plants don't really care, and some plants really don't want much at all. If you've got multiple beds or multiple pots going, ideally what you want to have is stuff that likes lots of nitrogen together, so that you can basically cycle around until you get to the point where you've got low nitrogen, it rests, so on and so forth. You'll basically see that on garden bed cycling. The other is some plants do not like being near each other, and that you do need to be careful of, and there's a few reasons behind it, and it can get a bit confusing. So the main ones will be is they'll compete for a particular nutrient, they'll compete for root space, and they actually attract bugs and microbes that are negative to each other, so they can actually kill each other off. So you want to make sure you're very careful with that. On the upside though, there are some plants that like being near each other, and putting them close together is a big benefit. You know, there's the old Three Sisters technique, which you may have read or heard about at some point. Corn, squash, beans. So the beans hold nitrogen in the soil, help feed the other two. They'll climb up the corn. The squash, big leaves, basically gives mulch and protection for the soil, helps get rid of weeds and so forth. So there's lots of little tricks that you can play here. So because I've got a couple of garden beds, I'm going to try to make that as good as I can with what I'm doing. Okay, so I finished planting my stuff in there, and at the moment it looks rather boring. So here we go, seen that part already. Now I've got along here, not very visible at the moment because they're all really tiny, but I've got myself spinach, wombok, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and in this one I've got mini capsicum. I also have some eggplant in there. I've also thrown fennel in amongst this, some more broccoli, threw a cucumber in there. My spring onions, there's some parsley parsnip in there which has kind of disappeared, a little bit more wombok, threw another cucumber in there. Yeah. So now the trick obviously is to make sure to keep it watered, keep enough moisture in there and nutrients so that it'll actually grow, and then you can actually see something actually happening. At this point it looks very boring, but here's one I prepared earlier. So this garden bed here was shown in one of my earlier videos, but this is how it's actually going now. So you've got pumpkin, carrot, beetroot, spring onions, beans, squash, zucchini, broccoli, silver beet, all growing there. That's several weeks worth. I've already started harvesting and eating from that. I also showed hanging basket here, squash, which is actually going incredibly well, strawberries, loving it, and zucchinis also going extremely well. This is the other one I showed here in the raised pot. So zucchinis and squash, just threw a cucumber in there as well. So got myself some capsicums, some of my basil from my other videos. Got it's lemongrass, just ridiculously amazing tomato plant, small capsicum. And then I'm basically trying to grow along here. So I've got some corn. That was in my greenhouse. However, the greenhouse blew away. So got some more there, some more silver beet. This is some strawberries. Various strawberries I've got going. Multiple different types. See how they go, see what they taste like. I'm basically going to try and get some climbing spinach going. And then here's another one with lettuce and celery and so forth in there. So you can see I've got a lot of various little bits and pieces going. So as you can see, growing your own food is not necessarily that complicated. If you've got the space for beds, fantastic. If you don't, there's lots of options for pots. A lot of pots are actually quite deep, so you can do a lot with it. So experiment, play around, grow yourself some food, and stick around for the next video. I hope you got something out of this.